Welcome to the MenTell Health Podcast. I'm Tim, and I invite you to join me. To join me? I invite you to join me on my journey to talk about men's mental health. Before we begin, as always, a brief disclaimer. I am not a mental health professional in any shape or form. I'm just a man who wants to get the ball rolling and get people talking about men's mental health. This is episode 7, and if this is the first time you are joining me, let me just recap what's happened so far. I talked about my monopoly induced breakdown of 4 years ago. Oh, I always have to think which year it was, but I think 4 years ago. Which got the ball rolling for me to talk about my own mental health and to seek help for my mental health with depression and anxiety. I've talked about how my journey began, how I found therapists, how difficult it is for most people in the world to find therapy. And I talked about different aspects of men's mental health. In this episode, I will dive a bit deeper into depression of people, men, and of me. Where did it begin, and what is depression? I mean, I'm not going to be able to answer that question in depth, but skim the surface a bit. Maybe in future episodes, I can dive deeper. Hopefully, with someone on the other end that talks to me about it. If that's you, just find ample contact possibilities in the show notes and in the description below if you are on YouTube. Yes, always a good start. Yes, depression. It's still in a majority of society, at least if you look at advertisement for therapy, for medication. If you look into the studies that are done, if you look in the stigmas that are that go with it, it is still predominantly seen as a condition that afflicts women mostly. Coincidentally, it's one of the few instances where the medical societies decided that no, we won't look just as men and put it all our results on the women as well, even though they have different physiologies to us. But they actually look more at what's going on with women and depression, but not because all of a sudden they've discovered that men and women aren't the same. It is because they, for a long time, just believed that men didn't have depression. And why exactly is that? I believe, and others, as far as my research goes and talking to other people has convinced me, believe that it is a big part to how we grow up, how we are taught, because especially over the last centuries, it is now breaking open a bit, but still with a lot of struggles and opposition. Gender roles, whilst in some aspects having served a purpose in the past and still for some people serve a purpose today, but they do define how we react to certain situations because they define how we are taught and how we brought up to deal with certain aspects of life and with certain situations. For example, young boys, young men, they grow up and they're taught to be tough. They're taught to not talk about their feelings, to man up. Boys are taught not to show vulnerability. They're taught to deal with their problems either physically by fighting or by exercising or by pushing it all down. And if we start talking or teaching our children that that's how they should deal with conflict and with difficult emotions, then they grow up to be adults that deal with their problems and with difficult emotions in that manner. This is why it leads to many, many men suffering for years in silence, for years under the belief they are alone. They are the only ones that have to suffer from this, that have to um, deal with this pressure, with these feelings, um, and with no one to talk to. But they all have no one to talk to. It's just it's a cycle. We teach our children to deal with emotions that way, and then the adults become that way. And because they didn't learn any other way to deal with it, they teach their children that way, and then it doesn't change. But it's not just that parents and fathers teach their children that way, but it's not only parents, fathers, mothers as well who teach their children, mostly their young sons, but also their young girls, these very specific ways to deal with problems. But we also, as a society, decided that he's the silent type. He's someone that thinks a lot. He's someone that doesn't talk much. He broods over problems by himself in his silent little room. And he's the strong one. He has the broad shoulders. He's the one who I can rely on whatever comes, and who I can talk to. Prescribe a attractiveness, a desirability on these attributes. And we think that that means people or men who are like this, they are the providers. They can be relied on. They can deal with the pressure and don't break, because men aren't allowed to break. They're meant to fix, to solve, and to think, but not necessarily to feel. And if you're brought up that way, you believe it. Like for centuries, people were brought up in the belief that the Earth is the center of the solar system and of the universe. And when someone showed them, evidence, hey, well, hang on a second, if that's true, then how come all the other planets, like, what's the big sun doing there? That's like in the middle. Nobody believed, because as a society, and as um, people grow up under this belief, it was just too much to comprehend and too much of a worldview to change overnight. And that's the same that's happening now. We have finally some people who start breaking down the barriers of gender roles and how they constrict us in our way to dealing with mental health. But because generations of generations have been brought up under the guise of, no, but that is the correct way, that's how it's supposed to be, they can't really. It's a lot to feel like your whole worldview is breaking. So, which is why I'm doing this podcast, because I want to share and to show that, hey guys, I'm a dude and I talk. So let's keep doing that. It's not really bad. It's actually very beneficial. But as long as we as society, women, men, and everyone else, believe that the normal, natural human emotions of weakness, of sadness, of vulnerability are emotions that men aren't allowed to feel, we won't be able to break those cycles. But something else that comes along with not allowing men to show vulnerability is something that makes us humans, is our societal aspect, is that we have social connections. We interact with other people, we share and we listen and we learn, we grow from each other. And it's been actually shown that social connections are the apple a day for mental health. The more you interact with other beings, as long as it's good for you. I mean, there's also too much. For example, I am an introvert, um, and while I benefit of interacting with other people, there's a limit. So it's good to know that as well. Um, yeah, just a little side note there. But anyways, these social connections are hugely important, and we mostly um, build them by sharing, by having common ground, and by talking about something that's going on with us. But we don't allow men to do that. We allow men to talk about sports, jobs, um, being, misogynistic about women, and talking down to other people because they need to cope with something. I mean, some are just dicks, but most aren't. Most are very, very, very vulnerable people who want to share, but don't feel they're allowed to, and then they lash out, which is actually one of the symptoms of depressions, which I will um, talk about in a minute. Yes, it is these traits that allow us to have meaningful emotional connections to other people, vulnerability, intimacy, honesty. They are seen in clear opposition to masculinity. And somewhere there's a clash because we have a staggering amount of lonely men who do not know how to deal with the emotions that the society or our society is putting on them because the world is changing, um, and the problems that we used to have no longer exist for a lot of these people. So we need to start working on the other ones, but we don't allow them to because that's not masculine. Yeah. So we need to get away of those ideas that men who are open, men who are vulnerable, men who cry, men who are passionate about nerdy shit. Sorry for the word shit. Um, Men who don't like sports, men who don't go into gyms, but also men who go into gyms but also want to talk about something that bothers them on their mind. Like there's no one way to be a man. Like there's no one way to be a woman. But we need to break that open, and we need to change how we perceive masculinity in order to have this massive wave of mental health problems in men, young men and old men, um, to break it. That was a big rant. Sorry. Let's talk about depression. What is depression? Depression is an umbrella term for, well, it's not really an umbrella term. It is a disease. It is a disorder, but it has many, many faces. There's no, I have depression, you have depression, we both have depression, and we know what it's like to be any other person. That's not true. Depression looks different for many, many people. Sometimes it's the same, but more often than not, it's not. It is also very, very difficult between biological men and women because of our brain physiology and of our hormone levels. The symptoms look different. The progression of the disorder looks different. The treatments can vary. For example, common symptoms of depression, in regardless of sex, is a feeling of sadness, of hopelessness, feeling empty, very, very tired, difficulty sleeping, either too little or way too much, and not feeling any pleasure from activities that used to give one a lot of pleasure, be it food, be it sports, be it socializing, be it games, anything else. That's very common in regardless of who has the depression, but something that is very common in men only, not only, but more seen in men, but not really registered by most people as symptoms of depression are um, escapist behavior, spending a lot of time at work or on sports or just by themselves, physical symptoms, headaches, digestive problems, pains, drug abuse, alcohol, or any other hard legal or illegal drugs, irritability or inappropriate anger, controlling, violent, or abusive behavior, failure to control your emotions, and to lash out at other people. And especially the irritability, the um, violent or abusive behavior, because depression is seen as this tired and lack of energy disease, doesn't feel like depression. It feels just like this person is an asshole. And they can be. I mean, it's not like everyone that has abusive tendencies or violent tendencies has depression. They can also just be an asshole. But sometimes it's the overwhelming of something's wrong with me and I don't know how to help it. And feels like the only outlet to feel, to get out of it, which doesn't excuse any violent or abusive behavior against other people. No, that's not what I'm saying. But it shows that there's more behind it than just being a dick. Unless you're a dick, then fuck you. But I'm talking to the people that are not dicks, that have possible depression. And yeah, because people think that feeling sad or emotional is the symptoms of depression. It doesn't have to be. In men, lots of men have, like I said, headaches and digestive problems, and sometimes it can even be a long-term pain. But because it's not talked about, when you see an ad about depression on the telly, or if you read a pamphlet at your doctor's about depression, most of the symptoms are feeling sad or feeling, lack of pleasure or desire to do anything. And there can be a symptoms of men, and it can sometimes just come along the other ones, but they have a variety of other symptoms, and then they don't recognize they have depression, and they feel very isolated because they can't find anything that describes what's wrong with them, so they can't get any help. And because men are not taught to seek help, if they don't find the answer quickly, they won't pursue the journey any further than that, which leads to the disease going on for longer, and longer, and the symptoms possibly being exacerbated more and more and more. And it can also lead to people downplaying symptoms, which then leads to them not being able to be diagnosed and to get the help that they need. Yeah, and like I said in other episodes before, is that because of all the traits we ascribe to masculinity, there is a reluctance to seek help or to accept help because, it looks like you're a failure, you're vulnerable, and you shouldn't be, because that's not what men are, according to these specific traits. And there's not, as also as I said in other episodes before, it is not inherently wrong to be masculine. If that is something you want to be, then yeah, go for it, be you. But it is always a step too far when it hurts you or other people. And there's nothing wrong with being a masculine, manly man and asking for help. That those things do not cancel each other out. It is possible and should be accepted. Okay. Yeah. So much for that. Sorry if that was a bit long and ranty and something that, yeah, sometimes I can become a little bit too passionate about that. So if it was incoherent, just drop me a message or comment below and let me know. What do you think? Maybe I've missed some symptoms. Let me know. Enough about other people. Let's talk about me. Yay! All of our favorite part of the episodes. I wanted to talk more about my depression. As I've said in the other episodes before, and also briefly in the summary at the beginning of the episode, I had my first I was first diagnosed with a depression in the late March, early April of 2019, when I actively sought out help after my Monopoly breakdown on New Year's day of 2019. And during the course of my therapy and in retrospect afterwards, I realized that that was not the first time I was depressed. That was not my first spout of depression. That was something that I had actually been living with for a long time without realizing, because shocker, I didn't know what the symptoms of depression were. I didn't know what depression is other than what you see on telly, where people are lying in bed all day and crying. And I never lie in bed long. I mean, the longest period was when I was lying on the sofa for days on end. I couldn't get up, but I don't lie in this bed. I sit in a chair. I sit in a chair and I stare either at nothing or at the telly, or maybe at most read a book I've read 100,000 times, so I don't have to really focus on it. These are my um, some of the early or most chill, well, not chill in regard of it's easy for me, but where other people don't have to suffer any consequences when I'm feeling depressed when I do these kind of things. And I think I've done them for the first time that I can recall was actually in my late teens, early 20s. Because what I also realized was that I had this fear of death, which is something that goes along with my depression and anxiety. I first remember that being the case, that happening when I was 17, 18, where I started to have a lot of wishful thinking, that I would hope that this genie would just pop up, and I had 3 wishes, and I would ask one of my wishes definitely to be for there to be an afterlife, so that I knew what would happen when I die, so I didn't have to worry about that anymore. And yes, and then in my early 20s, I see now some of the behavior that I did then that was very much in accordance to the list of other symptoms that I've just read out. I was very much escaping many, many things. I moved after school, but with that move along, I also lost contact to most of the people I had in my life then. And when some of these people actually moved closer to me, I didn't seek out any contact, because I felt that they would come to me, which was, I mean, yeah, maybe a bit reasonable, but also like, if you want to be happy, then seek out the people, because maybe they had other shit going on or whatever. I know, but I realized that I felt so sad for myself, and so also not just sad, but also a bit defiant. Um, but not in a healthy way, not in a way where, well, I seek out my own luck and I make my own friends. But I was actually really sad that that didn't happen, but I also didn't do anything about it. And I spent more and more time alone, sitting in my room, um, and not doing anything productive. But then sometimes I had these massive spouts of complete productivity where I was really, really, okay, now's the time. Now I will go out and make shit happen for me. And I applied for film school. I went out to audition at acting schools. Well, first I started auditioning for acting schools, and when that fell through, I started making short films and went into applying phases and did a task for film schools in Germany. But it's not that. Unfortunately, Germany is not a very good country for going into the arts. There's unlike England, where on most universities you can study some form of acting or film. In Germany, it's very difficult to get into any of those kind of courses. So once I hit certain barriers, and I was, not accepted because I didn't have much experience, so it wasn't super unreasonable for the people not to, allow me to study acting or to study film. I completely gave up, completely, and then, did nothing about it, and that also made me very, very sad, and it made me very. It started a lot of ruminating, many what ifs. Even though when I did the applying to film schools, I said, well, even if I don't get in, at least I know I tried. But I didn't give it my all, did I? No. At the first hurdle, I gave up, and then life not just happen, but also due to financial situations and things, I couldn't start again once I had motivation again, because depression doesn't go on forever. Usually there's phases. For some people they're very, very long, for other people they're very, very short, and also individually sometimes they can be, for the same person, long and short, depending on um, many factors. I talked about that in another episode. Just go back and listen to that one again. And if you want to know how my financial situation may have impacted my depression, I will talk about that next week in episode 8. Yeah, so I gave up on that dream. And in spur of motivational, like, positivity, went into another dream, academia, which then fell through again because I it's very difficult for one to get into academia, especially if you don't have any networks, and also if you don't know what you're doing and have really no one to turn to, because you give up quite easily on socializing, because my depression leads me to very, very strong escapist behavior, where I just shut myself off, which I also do sometimes when I'm not depressed, but that's mostly because of overstimulation. Anyway, so that had a big impact, where I was already depressed in my early 20s, throughout basically most of my 20s. Another aspect that played along with it was my loss of hair, which is also something that lots of men aren't allowed to deal with in any shape or form emotionally. It's just something, oh, you're a man, oh, be glad you have a good head shape, or, well, it's not that bad. For men, hair is not really a big thing. Well, sure, society, so it's still a lot more pressure on women when they lose their hair. But I, my own, felt a very, very big sense of loss, because I've always been someone who's had lots of different hairstyles, because I like to express myself through my hair a bit, which I now no longer can do. And this will never change. I will never have hair again. So I started losing my hair properly when I was 22. And being confronted with your mortality at that age is not great. It doesn't feel good knowing, oh, this is it now. This is my hairstyle for the rest of my life. Well, obviously I could do the thing, but I just don't think it would look good on me. So, yeah, but even then, that's it. I can't just let this grow out, go short, have all the way long hair, have mohawk, have other different hairstyles, get a perm or anything like that. And it hurts because I like my hair. I love my hair. And now I will never have it again. And yeah, I'm grateful that I have a beard and that I don't have any other diseases. But as a society, or in my surroundings, by lots of people that, not my close friends, but other people that just offhand say, oh, deal with it. It's not a big deal. You're a man. Bald men are cool. Well, cool. I'm glad that bald men are cool, but I would also be a dude with hair. That's cool. Um, and I've thought about getting hair pieces, which then you get mocked for, because that's just, men aren't allowed to be um, concerned with how they look, because then they're not masculine enough, or it's bad for them in some shape or form. It's not good to have hair pieces, because then you're mocked for it, and they're also really, really expensive. And yeah, so that was something that I found very, 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 very difficult to deal with. But overall, this isolation, that whenever I started to maybe try and reach out to friends and family, I didn't feel the it wasn't reciprocated enough for me to reach out, because for a long time of my life, and still in many aspects of my life now, I don't like to be the only one that does something. Well, no, that's not correct. What I mean is, I don't like to be the person that has to reach out and then be completely open book while other people are completely shut off. As soon as other people shut off, I will shut off. If other people open up, I open up. And I can be the one that starts the opening up, but I won't continue if the other person doesn't do it with me. And that's why it's so important to talk about our mental health. It will lead to more access for everyone, but also for men, to get help for their mental health. It will lead to it being less of a stigma, less stigmatized. It will lead to more communal and more social closeness between us. And maybe a big dream of mine would be, maybe by that there's less of me and nobody else matters, which is what leads to a lot of ignoring problems in our world because they might not concern you, which is something that lots of men deal with because they need to be successful, and in order to be successful, only you make your success happen, and nobody else can help you with it, and everybody else is just in your way. Yeah, and that's why it's so important to talk about our mental health and to share with other people how we feel and what's going on with us. And it's good if we have people in our life who can help us do that, and who we can talk to and you can talk to. It's also great if if there's therapy in your area, if you have access to therapy, or any of the resources on the website are good for you and help you. But if none of those work for you, you can always talk to me. There's a anonymous contact form on the website. There is a non-anonymous contact form if you just want to share anything with me. And there is an email address, and you can also contact me via the Instagram or on YouTube. And feel free to share your story and anything that's going on with you. But you can also always, if you're on YouTube, comment below and let me know what this episode, what resonated with you, what didn't, what you think, and what you feel about it. This is it for this week. If you liked this show and this episode, I would be super, super happy if you could give it a good rating on your podcast app or on YouTube. Apple Podcast helps the most to be seen and to be discovered by other people. But also, if you could share this episode and or the podcast with anyone you think could benefit from it. And I would end this episode, like I end every episode, with reaffirming to you that I see and hear you, and I hope you see or hear me again next week. Goodbye.